So I've been doing research for years and years and years now, probably since the year 2000s, like 20 something years in various different roles. And the feeling of anxiety that you get when you experience problems never really goes away. You always have this sort of deep gut feeling of like, oh man, what is going on here? How come I can't sort of get this thing to work out? What is this? And it's such a big part of the whole research process when you go through this, and eventually you kind of get to a point where you're just like, well, this is good enough. And it doesn't matter whether you're kind of doing the programming part, um, using tools, or analyzing the data, or writing things up, or whatever. It always gets to this point where you're just like, I just need to move on with it. This is good enough. There's like this moment where you get like kind of just stuck, and then you accept what it's about. And it happens over and over and over again, where you kind of look at what's going on and you're like, I can't quite get this, but let's accept it as is. Um, and that's kind of the moment where you're just like, well, this is just good enough, right? So it's the idea of being the difference between being an engineer, which I am, and a physicist or a chemist that would look at that look at the theory and understand the theory, but then when you put it into practice, you're like, none of this stuff works, none of it holds. And then you got to figure out, what do I got to do with this? Right? When you put it into practice, it always, almost always, never works out the way that you thought it would in terms of anticipating it. And, you know, you might think of it as bugs and all that kind of stuff, but it's just making things work. And that is part of what you do in research or development, is just, but you inevitably get to a spot almost always where you go through this moment of what is reality compared to what you thought would happen. And that thinking of what happened is usually sort of the theory or the belief, and then you see what actually happens, and it's almost never works out. And I'm entirely sympathetic for anybody that is in product development, or doing some sort of innovation role, research and development, because I know exactly what it's about, that nothing ever works out as planned, and then you got to figure out how to make this thing actually work out. It seems like it should work out, it should be easy to do, but it never is until you actually put it into practice and you realize, man, this is fiddly, and it never works out as the way that you intended it to be. It's always fiddly. It's always kind of like doesn't quite work like you thought. And that's the important thing to think about, is that it's never quite perfect, and it's likely going to be opposite of what you thought it would be, very much likely, and then you have to just roll with it. How do we actually deal with um, something being different, or just doesn't work out? I remember learning about the ideal gas law, and that's a huge part of engineering. Or I was chemical engineer, it was really a huge part of it. You use it all the time, and then you go to put it in practice. I remember doing this one lab, and nobody's results held at all. They were all over the place, and we're trying to figure out what to do with them. And I think that is pretty normal to have, the ideal gas law, the sort of basic thing of how this actually works, and then having results that held in some sort of way. Um, and and they're not going to hold the way that you thought it would be. And I think that's an important part of the process, is to realize this, that it is struggle. It's a struggle with it, and you have to be entirely empathetic throughout the process of trying to get this, anybody trying to get something to work like that. because man, it's a journey. So, and I think that's an important thing to remember is it's never going to work out that you thought it would in the way that you thought it would, and it's a very much a journey. It's very difficult to get it to function um, in the way that you think it should function. So just be to anybody that's going through this, just make sure you're very empathetic, very much um, knowing that it's hard to do, and you just get practice with it in terms of figuring everything out. All right, take care and have a wonderful day.